The parry is one of the most essential combat mechanics in Ghost of Yotei, and if you're struggling with the timing, you are not alone. So let's break down the parry timing, and tips for helping you nail the perfect parry every single time. Now there is no doubt that it's much more difficult to parry in Ghost of Yotei compared to Tsushima. Not only does the parry window itself just seem a lot tighter and more unforgiving, but combine that with the overall increase in difficulty, and that makes parrying in Yotei much more of a high risk, high reward scenario, especially in higher difficulties where if you miss just one parry, you're pretty much dead. Fortunately, the game has a couple of options to help make that a bit easier, but before we get into that, let's break down the Parry Basics. The perfect parry is a skill you unlock in the Onro branch of the skill tree and is one that I recommend you grab pretty much straight away. A successful perfect parry will not only deflect incoming damage, but it'll also break the enemy's stance and provide you with a window for a counterattack, which in most cases is going to be your best window for dealing damage. Now it is important to note that in a lot of situations, a block works nearly as well and it's much easier to pull off since you just have to press and hold down the block button. A block is still going to negate incoming damage as long as it's not a red unblockable or a blue glint attack. So when in doubt, if you're facing a string of quick attacks or surrounded by a group of enemies, just press and hold down the block button and that'll usually work pretty well. But the parry has the added benefit of instantly breaking the enemy's stance no matter their weapon type. So if you're someone like me that really likes to play with a particular weapon and really doesn't like switching mid-combat, the parry is definitely the way to go. Okay, but with the basics out of the way, let's break down the parry timing, or when exactly you need to press the block button in order to pull off the perfect parry. Now according to the guide, the best time to parry is right before the enemy strikes, or in other words, right before the enemy's attack hits you. So the thing we have to factor in here is Atsu's parry animation. If we look at the block all by itself, you'll see that the movement for the sword is Atsu bringing it down in front of her. Now each weapon type does have a different animation, but the good news here is that you don't need to memorize the timing for each one. The parry timing seems to be about the same no matter which weapon you choose. But overall, the animation itself is pretty slow and a little clunky, which is one of the things that I think throws people off the most. It's sort of just this awkward movement, but it really isn't all that much different from Ghost of Tsushima. Jin had essentially the same movement with his sword where he brought it down in front of his body, so if you are used to Tsushima, it shouldn't be all that different. So the key here is that you want to fully be in that blocked position by the time the enemy's attack gets to you, and that animation does take a second to play out, so you need to factor that in. Now I found that it's most helpful to watch for the swing of the enemy to move forward. Once the enemy starts to move their swing forward, that's when you want to press the block button.
I'm having fun. Are you?
Now in this example, I'm not using any charms or armors to enhance my parry window, and I have the difficulty cranked all the way up to lethal. So if I can do it here, you could definitely do it. Once again, watch for the enemy to move their swing forward. Once they do, that's when we press the block button. Now another really important thing to remember is that when you see the blue glint show up on the enemy's weapon, that just indicates whether or not you can parry the attack, not when you're supposed to press the parry button. To pull off the perfect parry, you still want to focus on the attack itself and not the blue spark. This actually really throws me off, and I suspect that it's confusing for a lot of players as well. So just remember that when you see the blue spark, you're still waiting for the enemy to move forward with their swing. Now if you're still struggling with the parry, here's a couple of other things that might be helpful. By pressing the button to switch your weapon, which for me is triangle, you can slow down time, which will essentially extend your window for being able to parry. For example, whenever you see the blue glint of the weapon, press and hold down your weapon swap to slow down time, which will give you a bit more time to press and hold that block button. I found that this is also a really useful strategy when going up against an enemy with a spear. These attacks are generally more difficult to parry because they're a lot quicker, and it can just be a lot harder to time your block with the movement of the spear. But if you slow down time first, you can more clearly see the tip of the spear, which is going to make it easier for you to perfect parry. Now another trick that might be helpful is something that I call the reverse parry. With this, instead of pressing down the block button to parry, you're holding down the block button all the time, and when it's time to parry, you quickly let go and re-press the block button. Now this might be a little bit tricky to start, but once you get the hang of it, some might find it a bit easier to pull off consistently. It also has the added bonus of you pretty much always being in the block position, meaning even if you miss time to parry, you're still getting the block and therefore negating damage. Now if you are just looking to practice the parry and to get a better feel for the timing, a good way to start is by practicing the perfect dodge. The timing for the perfect dodge is the same as the perfect parry, but the benefit here once again is that even if you mistime it, you're still dodging out of the way. Once you notice you're able to start hitting the perfect dodge more often, then you can go in for the perfect parry. Now lastly, another thing that you can do is go into your settings, select custom difficulty, and adjust the parry window timing. Now some purists might say that this is cheating and not to do this, but hey, this is a single player game and it's supposed to be fun, so don't feel bad going in there and adjusting your settings if you need to. A slightly more increased parry window feels a bit more natural for me, and it does make the game more enjoyable even if you still like playing on a harder difficulty. Now once you've got the perfect parry down, there's a couple of armors and charms that you'll want to pick up to help you make the most of it. The first being the Bounty Master armor. When upgraded all the way, the Bounty Master increases the window for both a perfect dodge and the perfect parry by a major amount, and gives you the ability for 3 counterattacks after a perfect parry. Now to be honest, I find the increased parry window on the Bounty Master to be pretty unnoticeable. I experimented with it a ton and didn't really notice much of a difference at all in the timing of the parry. For me, the real benefit is the 3 additional counterattacks, which can make pretty quick work of both bosses and groups of enemies. Now to get the Bounty Master, you'll need to complete a couple of bounties first, and once you do, you'll be rewarded with a secret mission to track down and kill Soma the Condemned.
How would you feel about taking on a special kind of bounty?
Once you do, the Bounty Master armor is yours. Now this really did end up being probably my favorite armor in the entire game, but I will say on lethal difficulty, I just don't think it's worth it. On lethal difficulty, it makes a little bit more sense to have an armor that gives you a little bit of a buffer if you miss time a parry, so you'll need something with a little bit of extra health or defense. Now a charm that I definitely would recommend picking up to help with the parry is the charm of Futsunushi. The charm of Futsunushi is a major charm that makes parries, and perfect dodges easier to perform. So basically, it takes all the most awesome things in the game and makes it even easier. Now to find the charm of Futsunushi, you'll need to complete the Faithful Leap Shrine, which you can find right here in Hidaka Grove. This is one where I really could tell the difference in the parry timing, so it's one I would definitely recommend picking up as soon as possible. There's literally no downside to having it equipped at all times. And speaking of no downside, there's no downside to checking out this video right here where I break down the top tips for exploration in Yotei that you absolutely need to know. So thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you over there in a minute.
Good. Now we'll do it together.